She said, these are easy. We could make these. And the light bulb went on in my head, and I could see the store. I could see everything because I'd been to factories that made stuffed animals.
I'm Danielle Elliott-Smith, and this is Hope Comes to Visit, a podcast that celebrates the light we find in each other's stories. I am really excited to introduce you to my guest today. My guest, Maxine Clark, thank you so much for being here. You are the founder and former CEO, so Chief Executive Bear of Build-A-Bear, and you have so many other titles. So the CEO of the Clark Fox Family Foundation and the Chief Inspirator of the Delmar Divine. You are obviously well known here in the St. Louis area, and there isn't anyone in the world who hasn't heard about Build-A-Bear. I was in Copenhagen just a month ago, and I'm walking through the airport, and I look and I see Build-A-Bear, and I think, Build-A-Bear is worldwide. And I knew that I was going to be sitting down with you in a couple of weeks. So let's take a quick moment to thank the people that support and sponsor the podcast. When life takes an unexpected turn, you deserve someone who will stand beside you. St. Louis attorney Chris Dully offers experienced one-on-one legal defense. Call 314-384-4000 or 314-DUI-HELP. Or you can visit dullylawfirm.com. That's D-U-L-L-E lawfirm.com for a free consultation. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Your story, your light is such an inspiration to so many. And knowing that I was going to be sitting down with you, you and I go back quite a bit. But what I love about your story is your heart and your inspiration. Will you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about your inspiration behind Build-A-Bear first? And then we're going to dive into your philanthropy and your heart for kids and all the work you do here in St. Louis.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Well, Build-A-Bear I didn't dream up going into my own business because I worked for the May department stores for 20-something years. And I always ran my own business, but on somebody else's nickel.
Right.
And lots was happening in the I loved working for the May Company. I had so many opportunities. It's how I came to St. Louis. It's how I met my husband. It's how I have so many friends and roots here now. So it was a wonderful career. But just one day, in the tech revolution of our country and starting to use technology in business, I realized that they weren't going where they needed to go. And while I was running a gigantic company, Payless Shoe Source, with 4,500 stores and doing $2.5 billion, it wasn't what it was cracked up to be. The further up the ladder you go, the farther away from the customer you go. And I think my strength has always been understanding who I'm talking to, who I'm working with. And that was my journalism. I loved journalism. I was a high school editor of my newspaper. I took journalism in college. And it made you go out and ask questions and write stories and work on projects that would elevate somebody else's brand. And that to me was really fun, understanding the customer. And so I decided to leave that job. Payless was going public as a separate company. I didn't want to do that. And it was in Topeka, Kansas. I wanted to come back to St. Louis. I had never really left. I was just commuting. But and I wanted to get my kid think back. That was really it. So my next door neighbor kids, I grew up in a neighborhood where I was really good friends with other adults. And the two kids that lived next door to me, we were really close friends. So I would pick them up in the morning and take them to school and pick them up in the afternoon and bring them back home. And on our way home that day, we decided to stop at a toy store near our neighborhood and look for Beanie Babies. They were really popular.
I remember the Beanie Babies.
And they had a sign in the window that said, "We have Beanie Babies." So we stopped and went in, but they didn't really have any because during the day, the parents trolled the stores to buy them for their kids, and they took the discovery away. They took the fun of the collecting and cataloging and putting it, together and seeing how many you could get away. And when Katie saw they didn't really have them, and she was disappointed that they had a sign in the window that
said, "We have
dishonest,"
them, but
yeah, she said, "These are easy. We could make these." And the light bulb went on in my head, and I could see the store. I could see everything because I'd been to factories that made stuffed animals, and I knew that we could, rejig it to get it to be facing the customer instead of in a factory.
Okay.
And I looked around for businesses in America that could find it. But we went home to my house. The kids went downstairs in my craft room and got out all the stuff to make, the stuffed animals. and Katie had already drawn the one that she wanted. And she came up and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking for a company to see." I was netscaping because that's where we were in 1997, late 96, I think we were. And I said, "I'm looking to see if there's a company I could buy and turn it into a place where you can make your own stuffed animals." Didn't have the name yet. And she said, "Well, I didn't mean that." I said, "Well, I know you didn't, but I think it's a really good idea." And again, it's a hands-on experience. Kids are getting in front of screens now, and it was very hard, hard. And a stuffed animal is very soft. But I knew about my relationship with my stuffed animal, my teddy bear, Teddy, very creative name. And Katie and George, her stuffed animal, and her brother Jack had Teddy. His was Teddy. And they didn't go anywhere without him. If they came to spend the night at my house, those bears were with him. And I loved them as much as they did because I could remember my relationship with my stuffed animal. And when I lost him, I was beside myself. So all of those experiences, my own childhood, their childhood, the childhood of their friends and my other friends' kids, came to play in what we built as Build-A-Bear Workshop.
See, that's extraordinary. And it's just these little pieces of light bulb moments go off. And you think, wait, I can do this and I can create this extraordinary experience for children. Yeah. How hard was it to get it started, right? I mean, you're talking about late 90s, early 2000s. In the mid 2000s, I wrote a book about women starting businesses, right? And so I know that generally speaking, when women start businesses, we, especially from home, we start small and grow. The smallest percentage of women go after venture capital, go after funding and say, I've got something big that's going to grow. And they ask for investors. So what route did you take and how did you ever dream that this would be as big as it is?
I did dream it. I wrote a 10-year business plan.
Good for you.
And I wasn't going to do anything small. I mean, I ran a 2,500 store company. You can't go to small what other people seem as small is not small. Build-A-Bear has like 600 stores around the world. That's small in comparison to many retail chains. So, but it's big in what it produces, and not so much just the money, the memories and the heart and the soul of relating to your customer in a different way. So I did have that plan. I knew it could be successful because kids told me it would be successful.
Right.
I went straight to the kids. My first board of directors was children, and
really,
my friends' kids I met in the mall. I said, "Would you like to be on a board of directors?" And they looked at me like I was crazy, but we did. We met on Saturday mornings in the store before it was built, and then after it was built, they helped me decide what were good animals for the beginning. And they're all grown up now, and they have their own children, and they bring their own children to Build-A-Bear. But that was very helpful to me. Not that I didn't know what I wanted, but I always have known the customer was the key to success. And I can go all the way back because I went to work at the May Company in Washington, D.C. I moved to Washington, D.C. My intention was to go to law school. I had to go to work to pay for it. And I got a job in the executive training program at the company in Washington, D.C. And I loved it from the beginning. I had no idea that's what people do, where merchandise comes from one place to another. Mm-hmm. Because my sister and I were both small. And my mother made our clothes, partially because we were small, partially because she loved it. She was creative, but we couldn't afford to go buy those clothes that were, now they don't seem so expensive, but in those days it seemed expensive to us. And I remember when I got to be best dressed in my class, that was like a really big deal when your mother. I didn't tell people my mother made my clothes.
Right.
But anyway, I was really meant for the business. And my college marketing professor, Dr. Carter, he encouraged me. He said, you got to go earn some money to go to school. You better as well go into retail. You're really good at it. And I thought, how does he know I'm good at retail? I never worked at a retail store. I like clothes and I like things like that. But he had from the questions and what he was teaching us in marketing, branding and things like that, he could see my hand going up all the time. And he knew that I really had a passion for it. And I did. And one day, many years later, he invited me back to teach his class and with my book and give everybody in the class a book. And I was really proud because he had a lot of a say in that book. Not from did I consult with him, but he taught me a lot of things that are in that book. And also, I went a lot of places that I couldn't afford to go in the door, but I would observe. With my mother on Saturdays, we would go downtown in Miami and just look in the windows because we really couldn't afford what they were selling, but we could dream about it. And I always wondered, where are they wearing all those clothes? Because, and even in Florida, when it's hot, they would show women in mink coats and windows. And yes, when they got to the holiday season of cruise wear, then it was obvious what you could wear that anywhere. But so for me, it was always interesting more than I knew. I just liked it, and my mother made me beautiful things, and people always admired me. But it wasn't like I thought that was going to be my destiny. In fact, I wanted to do anything a woman didn't do when I graduated from college in 1971. I didn't want to be a teacher, nurse, social worker, or secretary. I wanted to do something different. And law, I wanted to be a civil rights attorney. I grew up in the civil rights movement, and my mother was a civil rights person for children with just differently abled children. And I thought that they needed a lot of help, and so there was a real opportunity for me to make a difference in that world. And I intended to do that, but I got a job, and my boss got sick, and he had to take off about 9 months because he had a heart attack, and in those days you took a long time off.
Right.
And by the time he came back, we had changed the whole department and turned it around. He was doing well because it was a women's sportswear, but we made it for the 21st century, we were still in the 20th then, but we made it for working women, and we just did a huge amount of business, and he got his biggest bonus ever, and he shared it with me, and I wasn't bonus eligible. So that was an important lesson, that if you do what you're supposed to do, number one, go with your heart, but also realizing that you're doing it for someone else also. His success was important to me, and I didn't know him very long because I just worked for him for maybe 6 weeks, and it was such a talk of the company because who's she? Who does she think she is? And one of the great things about retail is that it's results oriented. So it doesn't matter if you're tall or short or male or female, you get the results. That's all they care about. That's what they notice. And I was good at that. I was really good at the consumer. I would be on the floor all the time talking to the customers. And my curiosity is my superpower. And it really paid off in almost every single thing I've done in my life. Sometimes somebody might get irritated that I'd ask one of my deep dive questions. But, for the most part, it's just been my real ability, that ability to ask a question and not be worried about they're going to think it's a dumb question. Just ask it and get it out there. And it's usually a question that other people are thinking, but they don't have the guts to ask. So it helps a lot more people than just you get the answer.
I feel as though you have many superpowers, and curiosity is one of them. But I feel as though your heart for people and your recognition of who you're talking to and your ability to listen to their answer also fall into your superpowers, because you've mentioned the customer, the consumer a number of times, right? So your recognition of who you're talking to and who matters. You're not money motivated, you're heart motivated for the person you're listening to.
Right.
And I think
that's true.
That is rare, but I think that's probably the beating heart behind so much of what you do and the success of what you do. I think about how with Build-A-Bear, we get to put the heart in the bear, right? Or in whatever animal we're choosing, right? I gave Build-A-Bears to, when I got married in 2002, I did the Build-A-Bears for both our flower girl and our ring bearer. And it was so sweet to give that to them. And then my daughter was a flower girl, and she was given the very same thing.
Wonderful.
And it was just such a neat full circle moment. But actually, it's interesting you mentioned that one of the first things you wanted to be was a civil rights attorney. That was one of the first things I wanted to be too. I wanted to go work for Morris Dees at the civil Southern Poverty Law Firm, because I grew up in Los Angeles and there were so many civil rights issues at the time. And I was recognizing how unfair the world seemed to be, and I didn't like it at all, and I ended up going a journalism path. But
we have a lot in common.
Yes, we definitely do. But we're friends on Facebook too, so I recognize that we have a lot in common in many areas. But let's talk about the Delmar Divine. So tell me about that.
The Delmar Divine is I'm not saying I ever dreamt that either, but Michael Brown died in August of 2014, and the next day I went over to Ferguson or wherever. It was such a crossroads where he was, and I sat on a hill with a bunch of young black children, and I was just sitting there. I needed the peace. I needed to know, why did this happen to a young teenage boy with so much future? And now 11 years later, he could have owned his own HVAC company. That's where he was going to school. He had gotten into the HVAC program, and that was what he wanted to be. And he was just a kid, walking across the street. Yeah, maybe he stole a pack of cigarettes or something, I'm not sure. But most of us know they experience that, and our parents see us. It's young enough when you do it. Your parents see it and say, we're going back there, and you're going to say you're sorry, and you're going to give that back to the, it's sort of part of a life lesson that you have to have. And I was sitting there talking to the kids, and I realized that these kids, they were mumbling a lot to each other. They weren't rude to me. Obviously, I'm sure they wondered, who the hell's that? What's she doing there? But they were very nice, and I listened to their conversation for a long time. And one of the young men, I said, look, is there anything I can do to help? And he said, well, you see that car over there? And he pointed to a car that was sitting on cinder blocks. He said, that's my mama's car. And her tires were stolen. And that was 3 weeks ago. And a policeman has never come to write the police report so she can get the insurance. And he said, but they follow a teenage boy, out of a quick shop. And, here we are. And I thought it was a really astute statement, by the way. And I said, well, I think I can help with that. There's tons of police around here. Maybe we can find one of them to write the report. And I never heard, we didn't exchange cards or anything like that. But you realize that there's little simple things get in the way of people, average people, doing the big things. I don't know. He might have wanted to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer. Yep. Who knows? But then we were talking to some of the other kids I was talking to. I said, what did you do this summer? And they looked at me like, well, hung out. What are we supposed to do? And I realized that my friends' kids of the same age were going to summer programming. They might be at, picked out the university they want to go to, and they go to a summer program there. They have access to so much information. The same information exists that is available to these other children, but if you don't know it exists, you don't know where to go to look for it.
Right.
I went back to our office, and my assistant, and I said, Ollie, what do you do what did you do when you were a kid for summer school? And she grew up in Kirkwood. She said, there were there were tons of programs. I said, we're going to find out what the summer camps are. We're going to build a platform for all kids to have access to the information, all parents.
God,
and that was blueprint4.com. And the first summer, which was 2015, we had 3,000 or so camps. Now we have well over 10,000. And we always marketed it in the city in North County. It's for anybody, but we made it so that the people who didn't have the information would have access to that information. And then we have a camp summit, which you're invited to. You can come to. It's in September, coming up in a couple of weeks. And we bring all the camp providers together, and we talk about what went on in the summer, finding common issues and opportunities, and what can we do to solve that problem together. And they never did that. They didn't have like a consortium of summer camps. And that's a lot of camps. And the average summer camp's about $250. So you have two kids that if you were putting them in camp all summer long, that would have cost you a lot of money. So people pick and choose something that's going to have, really, if it's sports or if it's science, and we have all those things. And prior to Blueprint, we didn't necessarily have as many in North City and County as we should have based on the population. But now we do. People, when we have the data from the app, we give them all this information, and we say, here's how many people were looking for an art camp in 63136, but there was only 2. You missed an opportunity, and then next year they'll adjust accordingly.
Okay.
And we'll help them with the marketing, because we'll push it so that everybody knows that. But we have enormous resources in St. Louis, enormous. And we've talked to other cities about it. People have called us and said, could we license that for our city? But they don't really even know what they aren't willing to go out. And we went to all these camps. We made a list of all these camps.
Okay.
And thankfully, Michael Brown did not die in vain. He opened my eyes up to, a missing link in our community, and it's helped everyone. It's not just helped kids in City and North County, because parents use it from all over St. Louis, and we help them market their businesses. We help them. Mostly it's for parents and children, but we go to school fairs. They now have camp fairs in North County that we co-sponsor. They used to be out in West County, but nobody set up tables for the parents in North County as if they didn't have any money and they didn't have any kids, and they had both. So how can we? That's just a symbol of other issues that people have, and they have the same desires, but they just don't know it exists.
They don't know it exists. And I think that you're because if you don't know what you don't know, then those kids are left to just fend for themselves, but they'd love to be involved in in the programs.
Yeah.
Is this something that if someone was listening right now and they wanted to get involved or they wanted to help or assist with the work that you're doing,
Yes.
is it something that people could get involved in helping?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a brand new one that we're working on right now.
Okay.
We're really moving quickly because it's associated with Halloween. But when I was a little kid, and maybe when you were too, there was a program called Trick or Treat for UNICEF.
Okay.
And it put UNICEF on the map. The first one was in 1950 in Philadelphia, and they raised $17.3 million.
I remember
which is a lot.
it.
And then it spread around the country, and now it's sort of, I think, not so popular. But we're going to do Trick or Treat here in St. Louis,
Okay.
across St. Louis, so that kids can trick or treat and get candy, but they also can get coins. And we've designed a box, and we're going to do all this distribution through the school districts, the libraries, the Boys and Girls Clubs, because I want children to realize they can make a difference. And these trees are not free. The trees that we're going to need to plant in North St. Louis are not free, but they're not hugely expensive. So actually, a box of pennies would be enough to buy a seedling tree somewhere and get it a good tree, the tree we want to have, and replace that tree. And when these children grow up, that tree will be tall again like it was a few months ago before the tornado. And they can say to their children, I did that. And I did that. I felt like that. I felt like when it put UNICEF on the map, but also I planted trees in Israel. And when I went to Israel for the first time, many years ago in the 70s, I saw my trees. And it made me feel like I had done something for the world. Because you're a child, and most of the time they just treat you like a child, and they let you have fun. But it is fun to do good things. I loved selling Girl Scout cookies.
Yes.
So there are many things, but if you're not in that program because it doesn't exist in your neighborhood, then you might not get a chance. But this is something every kid can do. And I've talked to several superintendents of schools the last few weeks. I came up with the idea. I talked to Forest Park, and I talked to Relief, Missouri, which is where most of the trees come from that are on the cities and streets. And everybody was like, for it. Let's do it.
Okay.
So so you're the first one. I haven't had any public announcement about
Yay.
it, but we are going to put it out there. And obviously we have a short window of time to get all the information out there. So we've been feverishly working on the marketing and working on how we're going to distribute the products and collect the money. That's the hardest part of all.
Okay.
Is getting the boxes out to the kids and the teachers and using it as a learning moment.
Okay.
Because I remember my grandpa took a quarter at one time for me, and he made it into 5 nickels, and he kept 4 of the nickels. He gave me one. So we're going to put this in your bank so that you can go to college. You can go to, and he hardly spoke English, to give it away to charity, to do something else. This one, this 5, you can go buy a piece of candy. Oh, with this nickel that I'm giving you. So, there were lessons that you learn in your life if you just stop to take a breath, that you would realize were preparing you for the life that you live today. And a lot of times we just think, oh, that's mom stuff or that's dad stuff or grandpa stuff. What do I need to know that for? But it does seep into you, thank heavens. And it does turn out to make you a part of you, of the person that you are, and gives you a structure that you may not need at 10, but you might need at 20, and you might need at 30, and you certainly need at 70 or 80 or 90. Living your life, because that's the hardest part of life, isn't the youthful part. It's really when you might be older and not healthy and really need to deal with a system that isn't necessarily in your favor. So you better be tough. And so I think that for me, it's always been about kids. I mean, I was a kid, and my mother would say to me, I'd say, Mom, what is this? She'd look it up in the World Book, and that was like the Google of our time.
Right.
And I'd go and get the World Book, and oh, Mom, of course, thanks. And I'd go get the World Book, and I'd get lost in it because every page had a smell. It had a certain feel. There were shiny pages.
Yep.
And when you opened it, it was like this. And I just keep going.
And exploring.
And on most of the projects she told me to look up in the World Book, I got an A on because I really dug in. It was like being, a story for journalism. You're really doing research. I loved research. I loved knowing how things work, even though that wouldn't be necessarily my career. I still am wondering about how do they build underwater tunnels and how do the airplanes fly? And,
I am insatiably curious about things all the time.
Yeah, so it's the fun of it. When I meet a young person that's what they're doing, I said, how did you decide to do that? And we get in this long conversation. And then we have a relationship because they told me something I had no idea about. And I've always wondered. And so it's also, when you're curious, there's a million things you can talk about with people. And honestly, you can relate to people that may not think you can relate to you.
Right.
Or they don't think that they could be a friend with you. And I have so many friends that I've made in the last, since starting Build-A-Bear, of course, but even since then with the project on Blueprint and living more times in the city of St. Louis and North County, with new friends and trying to solve problems together because the inequities are there and we can pretend they're not. But more women die of breast cancer in the Black community than die in the white community because they didn't get early detection. And yet look where we live. We live with the best hospitals, 3 systems of hospitals that are really high quality, but they didn't necessarily, there were all the reasons that are historic, didn't realize it. And now we're working as a team of women. This will be our second full year of bringing all those agencies together so that we can fill the gaps. If there's a gap, we can work with the doctors and we're working with Gateway to Hope, which is a really wonderful nonprofit that supports women who may not have the money or the insurance to go the whole route on it. If they find out they have breast cancer, how do they get to all the things that they're going to need? And that is an amazing organization led by a young woman who is a friend of mine, but we met through doing work in community work. She was working at Boeing. She was the chief of staff to the president of Boeing at the time, and we met. We had lunch a couple times, and I knew that she was a mover and a shaker.
Look at your beautiful heart. I mean, it's everywhere. I feel as though when I was working in the recovery space, I would answer the phone, how can I help, right? Like, this is Danielle, how can I help? And I feel as though that how can I help drives you as well.
Yeah.
Like, you instantly cotton to inequities and think, how can I fix this? How can I make this better? How can I use whatever connections I have? And this goes a little bit to the conversation we were having before. You said, like, how can I take 1 and 1 and not make it 2, but make it 100?
No. And Delmar Divine, the next year, actually, that fall, I was the board chair of KIPP St. Louis, and we were opening a school in the west end of St. Louis. And I had never really walked around that neighborhood, and I found all these beautiful homes and met the neighbors, and the neighbors were really helping us, like being like grandparents on demand, and they were great. And one of them said to me, why don't you look around the neighborhood? I see that you always go right, because I live, in the Clayton U City area. And why don't you take a different turn and go see if there's a house you see that you might want to buy, and we'll help you remodel it. I turned around, I turned another corner, and there was this hospital building. They were just nailing the for sale sign in. And I knew instantly what it could be. It was another light bulb moment. And I called Dennis Lauer at Cortex, and I said, Dennis, why don't you buy this building and turn it into a Cortex West for nonprofits? Because during this process of after Michael Brown, I met so many people that I didn't know in so many different nonprofits, and I realized that everybody was starting a nonprofit to solve a problem, and maybe there was another one that already existed, and we could work together for the 1 + 1 could equal 100. And but people didn't really work that way. They didn't know. They didn't do the research on competitor. And in the real business world, you look at your competitors, but they didn't necessarily do that. So I thought we could build a building where we could bring as many together as possible. And this building was quite big. It was about 500,000 square feet. So I knew that teachers, nurses, social workers don't make all that much money. We could build really great apartments with all the amenities that more expensive apartments would have, because the property was cheaper for us where we bought it. And we could have a mixed living and working environment. So it has 150, right now, phase 1 had 150 apartments. We have about 40 nonprofits that work in the building in health, education, and community development. And then we have conference spaces that we share. I told you we have a podcast room, so a lot of them use our podcast room. And then we have some retail. We spent a lot of time with the neighbors, because Build-A-Bear took 9 months from idea to reality. This took 9 years. Very complicated financial structure. But what the neighbors told us is, we need a bank. We need a pharmacy. We need an urgent care. And I live just 3 miles down Delmar.
Wow.
And there were 4 that I could walk to, but in their neighborhood, they didn't have that. So we went out looking for those. And I know how to do that, too, from retail. And we found some great partners to come in. St. Louis Community Credit Union was our first tenant. They signed the lease before anybody else. They said, we want to be there as soon as you open.
Right.
We'll open up right after. And they've been amazing partners. Young man, I read about him in I think, St. Louis Magazine, that he'd come back to St. Louis to open up this pharmacy for the minority communities, and all minority communities, people with certain health care needs that can't just walk into a pharmacy and get what they need. Personal that he had seen when he was in college at the University of North Carolina, and it just had stayed with him. He went on to be a teacher, Teach for America, and then he went to graduate school and got his PhD. And I said, well, we have a place for you. And that sort of turned the corner for him, because now he had a place. So now he had to take the idea from idea on paper in a story that he told a reporter to reality. And we're great partners. I mean, I'm not an owner of his business, but we are partners. He's an important part of our building. And he went and worked with all the different urgent cares, and he brought in urgent care there from SSM. So the neighborhood loved that. And then we have a deli. The neighborhood used to have like 45 delis, food markets. With the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, when the building was first built, it was an immigrant Jewish neighborhood, but an immigrant, broadly more immigrant. So they had lots of immigrants coming from lots of different countries. So they had all kinds of different food on Delmar. Nothing now in this particular area, or wasn't. But we worked really hard, and we've attracted a lot of restaurants back to Delmar. And they're in the Maker District, or in where we are.
Okay.
And then we also have, so the Delmar Divine is there. Ben Paremba, he was excited. He wanted to open a deli. He said, I heard you want a deli. Let me do it. And we partnered with him too. I mean, literally, they don't just walk in. You have to wheel and deal and get the right price and help with the build out. So I feel really that I supported some entrepreneurs there as well. And that bank, St. Louis Community Credit Union, has changed our neighborhood. They invest in the neighbors. They've invested in home improvement loans, in auto loans, in small business loans. And it has to be a local bank that knows you as a neighbor. But there was no bank there to know them as a neighbor. So they got discriminated against just by not having a bank. And then we know of all the other kinds of discriminations that happen. So this project is just beyond my wildest expectation. I had big plans for it, and I knew that it would be good, but I wasn't sure it would be good so fast. I mean, we're 100% occupied, and we have been since we opened. And phase 2 is going to open hopefully next year. We're starting it in the fourth quarter, and it was the nursing school and the nursing dorms and the cafeteria it was the kitchen and maintenance building. And so that's all going to be a real support system, 81 low-income apartments for working people. And there are all kinds of qualifications in housing that you can come up with. But we want to support people who do work, and teachers, nurses, social workers, believe it or not, make those low salaries that fall into low income. What a shame. Anyway, and we build quality apartments. Everybody has a washer dryer. They have disposal, microwave, everything that you could possibly want. They're not gigantic, but they're really nice. And we have a swimming pool. We have a gym, fitness center. We're building in this new part a new gymnasium that can house all kinds of activities for the community and the tenants, and a bigger conference in space. And the gym was one of those old-fashioned, like elementary school gyms, but it was a nursing school for adults. So it has a stage, and those really heavy old velvet curtains that used to have. We're changing all that. And then it has a basketball court. So we're going to open up some more youth activities. We have a lot of activities for seniors, but we don't have a lot of activities for youth. And there really aren't a lot of children, but this will be a way to attract children to the neighborhood, people with children, and also bring them from the local high schools that are around to after-school basketball. We're going to build pickleball courts. We have outdoor tables with chess tables, and we're going to have outdoor movies, so people from the neighborhood can have all kinds of enjoyment. We do have a park right near us where they do Shakespeare in the park and all that, and we have Forest Park right around the corner. But this is more like their space,
right?
And honestly, right on the corner of Clara and Belt, when I drive home every night, right now the kids are coming home from school, and there's a school, a gentleman volunteers to help the kids off the bus and make sure they cross the street, because it's a busy little corner. And every day, I think he might wait for me to leave. We have this relationship, and I think about that. When I was a little girl, I used to wave to my neighbor, she could see me in the window when I came in the door. He reminds me of that person, and we're building an Ameren substation to up the ante for the electricity in the neighborhood, for the whole neighborhood. And all the workmen, we wave at each other on the way into work. It's a beautiful day in our neighborhood. I even hum Mr. Rogers' song. I am so proud of what we've accomplished, but I'm proud of the neighbors that they shared with me what their dreams and hopes were, because they weren't that different than mine, and no different actually. But they just didn't know how to go about it. So together, we've brought the neighborhood organizations meet at the Delmar Divine. We bring them together, so we do things together, like Delish on Delmar, which happens on Delmar, October 17th. We do that together, the Maker District and our district, which is where Delmar Divine is, but Delmar Main Street Organizational Group and others. And we need to do that more than ever since the tornado that really torpedoed our area.
Right.
We've recovered. Many of the businesses on Delmar have not yet recovered. So we're working to bring people back and see the ones that have, and don't think we were all wiped off the face of the map. We weren't. And then help the proceeds, help the ones that are still digging themselves out.
You are involved in so many different things. What is the key to staying on top of it, or to feeling as though you have your hands in all of it and feeling like you're making a difference in each and every one of those areas?
Well, the real reason is the children. Children are the future of our country and of our city. And if we can't help the children be as successful as possible, and we have a lot of things in the way of that, then there's not a future for St. Louis, because the kids will leave and go somewhere else if they can't find what they want. And we're not a growing population at this point. We have to really work hard at that. So I do it for them because people did it for me. Who knew what I was going to be when I grew up? Yeah, I just wanted to be everything. At some point in my life, I wanted to be everything. And I'm doing exactly the work I'm meant to do. And at the time I'm meant to do it. It is joyful work. And joy is really what should fuel us, and hope, as you well know, that we can make it better, that we can individually make a difference. But if you're just sitting and, wringing your hands and saying, oh, woe is me, and St. Louis is so big, it's the worst this and the worst that. And I'm not from here. I love St. Louis. I moved here and bought a house in Lafayette Square that I could have never afforded in Washington, D.C., where I came from, and made great friends because everybody was redoing their houses. And it's so many connections started there. And I met my husband, and we have a great life together. And also, I want to throw this out, too, because you don't really know. You can only plan so many things in your life. And I'm a reasonably good planner. But in November, my husband had a stroke. And luckily for us, we live in St. Louis, Missouri, where there's incredible health care, especially at Washington University School of Medicine. And it's the hardest job I've ever had. And it's the one I'm most prepared for, because you have to be a bulldog in the system. And I went to the University of Georgia, so I'm a bulldog all the way. And you have to know how to negotiate and navigate and stand up for yourself and ask questions and take notes. And, thank God we have Otter, because I can get it all down and, while I'm listening. And he's made a remarkable, improvements, but it's not easy. And, it's hard work. And what about the people that don't know all the people to get in the door, don't know what insurance pays for or what it doesn't pay for? It may not have insurance, although Medicare does cover all these things for the most part. But you have to know how to navigate that system.
And how to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're a single person and this happens to you, who navigates for you? Or your family lives in another state. And it's a lonely time, because all the things that the day before he had the stroke, he rode his bike 20 miles in Forest Park. He was a very healthy person. And all of a sudden now he can't do that. So that was his relaxation was, going out and going to the park. And he's also an incredible entrepreneur and civic-minded person. He started Casa de Salud, and he started the Mosaic Project to bring more immigrants to St. Louis. He has on the board of SLU for a long time. Amazing person. And, we divided and conquered, worked in the criminal justice system, making sure that children don't get caught up in that as best we can. Because when you turn over the rock of poverty, there are, a million spiders, and their nets are knotted up, their webs, and you have to help them unknot it. And it's housing, homelessness, the criminal justice system, the education system, the healthcare system, the mental health care system, so many things that cause those knots. And people just give up. Right. And we have a lot of agencies. We have, over 20,000 agencies that are helping people, but you don't know. And sometimes it's pride. It's a lot of other things that keep you from the tools that could help you. And so we all have to listen so that we can lead that person. We might not know of everything, but we might know of one thing, or we have a friend who may know that.
Right.
And we can lead that person towards a better, connection for them. And we have everything in St. Louis that you could possibly want, probably more because of Washington University and St. Louis University that have a lot of research behind them that are really solid, programs. And the world should know about them. But so that keeps me going. And actually, I've learned so much in this process, especially with my husband, Bob, because, he actually knew that he had a stroke from
Really?
a program that we had seen that was produced here in St. Louis called BrainWorks that studied 4 different I guess diseases is the right word to use. And the first story that they told, these 2 doctors wrote these plays. Dr. Luthart and Dr. Kim, they wrote these plays was about a stroke, and a man who had a stroke in his life as the stroke happened, and then afterwards.
So he recognized the symptoms.
And we recognized the symptoms, and he called me right away, and he said, I think I'm having a stroke, and I was really almost home, and we got him to the hospital really quickly, and but he still had a serious stroke, and he's still in a wheelchair, but he's doing so much better, and I know that he's going to be able to do things that the doctors won't even tell you because they don't want you to get your hopes up too high, but he's a hard worker, and he's a physically fit person, so he knows that exercise is really important. That's what he loves, is the PT and the OT, get up and do that. So, it's been almost 10 months, and who would have thought it would have been that long? I mean, they told us it would be long, but we didn't believe it because, we're both, movers and shakers and get up and do everything on it. But it does take time. And it's another thing that sort of humbles you about what else is out there. And that's another thing that we have that's so incredible in St. Louis. Our healthcare system. We have world-class healthcare here, and we should be telling the world about it, because if I were going to live anywhere, I'm glad I live here, because I have access to probably number 1 or 2 healthcare system in the country at Washington University School of Medicine in certain fields, but SLU also is right around the corner, and they work together in many ways to, help us find the cure to some really crazy things that are still out there. So I've learned a lot. And I sat there with him and I kept a journal about what were the opportunities, not what were the problems. What were the opportunities? Because I saw so much, things that were wasteful, things that, people do because they have to do it quick. And that I thought could be, opportunities for new business models for people, how AI could come in and make the nurse's job easier, a lot of ways. And so we're working on that.
You mentioned hope before. How do you define hope?
Hope for me is like a future, that there's some place beyond today where whatever it is that you're worried about can be resolved or get better, or when you get sick and have a cold, you're not going to have a cold forever. There's, I can't wait till I get better. This cold is over. It kind of is that way. Like, it isn't permanent. It's the things that are wrong are generally not permanent until your senior most years, or you have a really terrible car accident. You can be in charge of your life, and you can make better decisions. And sometimes we're just kids longer than we should be. We're doing kid-like thinking instead of adult thinking. And there's a good thing about kid think, as I told you earlier, it's creativity. It's that anything's possible. Why, Mommy? Why can't we go here? Why can't we do this? Yeah, why? That's what we need to be using in St. Louis. Why can't we fix this? Why can't we all volunteer? Why can't we do? And not to be a temporary thing because the tornado is 3 or 4 months ago. No, we have to keep doing it because St. Louis deserves it, and there is a future for us. It's a fantastic city, and we probably have the best cost of living of any great place in the center of the country that you could possibly be. And in fact, a lot of industries exist in Missouri that exist here because they can sell their products to other states at a relatively low freight rate because they can get it there pretty quickly. That's why Amazon has so many warehouses here, because they can get stuff to people really quickly from St. Louis. And we don't even tell that story. Amazon knows more about us than we know, of course, because we buy from them and they know every little detail about us. But it's just such an opportunity to be here and to be working on helping St. Louis be all that it can be. I love St. Louis. I do think St. Louis has a forever, and I'm hopeful for what that forever will be.
What would you say to someone in terms of if they're sitting in that spot where they think, I have a dream, I think there's something more I can be, and they're listening to your story and they're thinking, wow, there's nothing this woman can't do. Like she thinks it and she does it.
No, there are a lot of things I can't do, but I know somebody who could help me do it.
Okay.
And that is really important. You do not have to do it alone. There is an ecosystem here in St. Louis that is open to, people are very friendly. And how do you get to that person that's going to be the friendliest? Sometimes you have to ask do you know somebody? I mean, I'm constantly speaking to people, and if I can't direct them to the right person, then no one can. All the years I've been in St. Louis, I know a lot of people, and that's also very joyful. My husband and I get a thrill out of doing that, of introducing, somebody tells us they need something, oh, do you know a doctor for this, or do you know a place I can buy this? And we do. So we make that connection, and that is such a simple thing. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes. And sometimes it might take 5 hours, but for the most part, it's one of the simplest. You don't have to do it. You're passing them on to the expert. And and then connecting people to the resources for entrepreneurship. We have programs in St. Louis that start in childhood. We have my friend Ariel Biggs, her St. Louis Biz Kids. She works with young children. Her son Mikey was an entrepreneur at 8 years old. That's when I first met him, and now he has I think a dozen vending machines all around town, and he's starting to sell them off so he can start other vending machine it's not a scheme, a pyramid scheme, but teaching other kids that they can own a business at 10 years old, 12 years old.
I love
and
that.
his mother drove him everywhere at the beginning to buy the sodas at Costco and put them in the machines. But, he has a pretty good nest egg already. And God bless him, And I met him when he was my height, and he had a little briefcase and it had his name, Mikey. And his mother is an amazing woman, and she does this for other families, too, to help them inspire their children with their talents. All the way up through Arch Grants and all the way up to WashU School of Medicine, where we have tremendous entrepreneurs inventing cures all the time and tools, equipment that might help a patient walk. Unbelievable ecosystem here. I'm not sure there's another city like this, and I know there's not another Arch Grants because we've checked that one out, and I've asked kids that call me from other states to look in their town and see if there's the right kind of nurturing program for an entrepreneur. And that doesn't matter what age you are, but somebody that, where they have a small business group or that people that work with them. We have a lot in St. Louis. Like everything, we have a lot. People just don't know how to access it. So we have to make it easier. But it's a big system, and it works in so many different ways. So you don't have to do anything alone. I didn't do Build-A-Bear alone. Katie and Jack, gave me the idea of, by saying, we can make this. And then what do you do with that? And then I was definitely determined, and I knew how to do it. I've been in retail a long time, but I didn't do it alone. I don't know. I'm not a CFO. I hired a CFO. I'm not a store operations. I never was in store operations. I hired a person to do that. That's what you do is you build the plan. It's like a giant canvas, and you let other people paint on it to their heart's content, so they can be the CFO they want to be, the store planner they want to be. And the other thing that was really important was to make sure that there was somebody to succeed me. A lot of entrepreneurs are not good at that. I have the best successor anybody could even hope for in Sharon Price John. We're friends. We talk a lot. She had to do a lot of things her own way, and some things I agreed with and some things I didn't, but I said, let's try it. Why not? And some of the things that worked and some didn't, but Build-A-Bear is a thriving company, and she has lived the dream for me so that Build-A-Bear is going on for a much longer time, and we're going to soon be celebrating our 30th anniversary.
Congratulations.
So I'm so proud of what the team today has accomplished, and there's many people that were there from almost the start of Build-A-Bear, but there's also a lot of new people that came to work in a company that values them and wants them to be successful and nurtures them and teaches them different aspects of the business if they want to learn it. And I'm so proud of what Sharon and the team have done, and I can just stand back and enjoy it. And I get to do some fun things for Build-A-Bear, but it is mostly I get to hug the kids and go to places where there's a lot of children and just watch what we've done. And it's not brain science in the sense of what the doctors at WashU are doing, but it is a different kind of brain science. A hug is worth a million words, and that's really what St. Louis does pretty well when we see a tragedy, but we don't do it all the time when we should be continuing these projects. And one thing, when they had the shooting at the Annunciation, the Catholic school, that day at Mall of America store, which is only about 10 minutes away, people went to make bears to bring to the children and make bears to bring to and I could see it on television that our bears, we can recognize our bears from afar.
I can too.
that they were doing their job. That's what they wanted to. I know it sounds like I'm crazy, but they want to be there for that child, for that adult, for that sad time and that happy time. That's what they're there for. You can tell them your deepest, darkest secret. They're not going to share them with anybody. You can tell them how sad you are. They're not going to laugh at you or think you're being silly. They're just going to be there for you. And they have been for well over 100 years. The teddy bear was invented in 1902, and they will be forever because nothing can replace a stuffed animal. It doesn't have to be a teddy bear anymore. It can be a kitty cat, a dog, a Pokemon, a Star Wars. I mean, that's what Build-A-Bear has brought to the table. We've reimagined what a huggable friend can be. And it doesn't matter whether that frog wears a wedding dress or a baseball outfit. It doesn't matter. It's the child's imagination. And that's what we love, love, love seeing every single day. And we hope that they'll remember those experiences. And the first children that came to make bears in our store now work for us, or they're bringing their own children in to build a bear.
That's amazing.
And we get letters about that I wanted it to be as good as it was when I was a kid, and it was even better. That is joy too. But I get joy in multiple things, but it's still a hug. Delmar Divine is a hug for a neighborhood. The other work that we're doing at the trees, I guess you could call me a tree hugger. We're putting together a program that children and their families can make a difference by just collecting pennies and dimes and nickels that we can all put together and add to the collaboration of bringing these trees back to St. Louis.
Where will those boxes be?
We're going to distribute them in many different places, libraries and schools and local businesses. So you'll be hearing about
And people will drop off their coins?
We haven't figured that part out, but yes, they will. They'll bring them to a central location, and we're working on that with a couple of neighbor. We want them to be in the neighborhood, so everybody's afraid to have a responsibility for all this money. I said, I hope it's as much as you think it is, but I think we'll figure that out.
Perfect. And where can people learn more about that?
We have a website, trickortreestl.com, but it doesn't have much there yet.
Okay.
But every day it'll have new information. And we are just really putting together all the materials. When I leave here, I'm going to work with the printer on the boxes that we're going to distribute for free to everybody. I remember my UNICEF box. I think I have it in some box at home somewhere.
I'm sure I still have mine somewhere.
We'll see how it can go. But I mean, when I called up Missouri, I didn't know her, Meredith Perkins, who runs Relief Missouri. We had an instant connection because we both cared about this particular issue that we have in St. Louis. She's been working on it. I called Leslie Hofarth at Forest Park Forever, and she was so open to it, and her team was really open to it. And everybody that we're talking to, we're asking for some donations to help us with the printing and some of the materials. Everybody said yes so far. I mean, people want to do good, and they don't have to do it themselves, and they maybe didn't have the idea that I had. And we're putting some resources from our foundation behind it, just to get it going. A team. I hired a woman to work for us for 3 months to help with marketing, and she's phenomenal, and she's doing a great job already. She started on Monday. So, you can do these things pretty quickly. In fact, sometimes the faster you do it, the better.
Better it is.
And Delish on Delmar, we did in a short time last year. We're doing it again, and we'll tell more people. But we had 3,000 people show up for Delish on Delmar last year, dancing in the streets, sitting in the tables, strangers, buying at the little pop-up shops where there were kids and adults with their pop-up products. So you can lace entrepreneurship, music, talent, city development, community development, all together in just about anything that you do in St. Louis pretty easily. And you were sitting here in Grand Center area, and what the Kransbergs have built here for the arts is just something I admire. They're friends of mine. They motivate me every day just to know that this is possible. And the more things that we do like that, what they did and what we've done and what other people are doing. There's my friends Ken and Beverly in the Delwood area that built R&R. They're just amazing people. And you find there's more of you out there than you think, and then you have so many more people to be hugging. It's there's so many people that are doing amazing things in St. Louis that we're small enough that you can know them, and we're also small enough that when you do something, it's going to make a difference, and we're big enough that when we do it, it matters.
Right.
So this is a perfect city actually for so much opportunity and of change, not just for St. Louis, but to teach other people. In fact, I get phone calls from all over the country for people to come and see Delmar Divine, as if it was some impossible idea. But we just took an old hospital and turned it into still a caring place. It'll be a caring place forever. It just won't be a hospital. And I don't think it's fancy, but a lot of people say to me, oh, it's fancy, but it really isn't. It's a basic building, but it was a really strong structure. So when the tornado came right down Delmar, we didn't lose our building at all. We just lost the air conditioners on the top of the roof. But that's just replaceable. So many homes that had been not really repaired, not with good tuck pointing, or not tuck pointing in a long time, just, disintegrated in the wind and the trees. So sad. But they'll be back, and it gives all of us an opportunity to buy one tree, which maybe is $30 or something,
right.
Or less. Think about that. That's something you could do, and that tree will be here standing and growing, hundreds of years from now, just like those trees were there for us to enjoy. So
you mentioned that you've done everything in the exact right time that you're supposed to be doing it. Is there anything that you've done that falls into the category of this is what I'm most proud of?
Oh, so many things. So many things. I'm really proud of how I evolved. You know, that how because my mother was a social worker, even though she was an untrained social worker, and she wanted me to be she was a socialist and I wanted to be a capitalist, you know, kind of thing. But I am my mother's daughter, and I'm also my father's daughter, who was a small business person. And he never said he was an entrepreneur. He used to say when he wrote, "What's your occupation?" Small business owner. He was electrician, and then he became a salesman. I am their dream. My grandparents came to this country for me, and they didn't even know they didn't even have their own children then. They came for me, and I have tried to live that life that I think they wanted, and I didn't even really know them. They hardly spoke English, and they died young, and so I was just a little child. So I just really think that they would. My mother died young too. She died at 55 years old. She was an amazing force of nature, and I went to be that capitalist. I still wanted to do that, but I've also done the work that she would have done too, and maybe not quite as good in some places and other places because I have different interests really strongly. But also my teachers, they played such an incredible role in my life. And we didn't have social media, so you didn't have their phone number.
Couldn't get back to them.
Mrs. or Mr. So-and-so.
Right.
But I'm friends with a lot of my teachers, by the way, because they're never that much older than you.
Right.
And they're 5 or 6 years older than you, but you think they're a lot older than you when you're in school, and especially your high school teachers. And I am still in touch with a lot of my teachers. I'm in touch with my friends that I grew up with. We have a very unique growing up experience because we lived in Miami, Florida, and we had this incredible influx of Cuban refugees to Miami as children. And we all got to be friends with new people, and that was our job. We were supposed to be friendly. We were supposed to be helpful and show them where the lockers were and show them. And we talk about this a lot because we have these Zoom reunions all the time. That we
I
get
love
together.
that.
We had 1,200 people in my senior class. We don't have 1,200 people on these calls, but to be able to be friends with people who you can't hide from, they know who you are because they were sitting next to you in the 5th grade.
Right.
But just all of that blends together, and it's not any one thing that's made me who I am today. It's all those things added together, and that's what I try to tell children who I know are under stress, that this is part of the experience of life, and you chalk it up to education, and then what do you want to be when you grow up right now? What is it that you're thinking of, and what kind of things can we do for you that will get you on that track? And I think all of us in St. Louis, it's one opportunity we really have, is to allow those children, especially high school kids, to be interns in our businesses and paid interns, to see they are brilliant, by the way. We have summer interns every summer. We have learned so much from our interns. And they're not all, the college students have a certain level of different competency than the high school students. We had a 16-year-old this summer, an unbelievable contribution to our business and to our family foundation. And we give them real projects, and we make them write that out on their resume, and they always underestimate how much impact they had because they're kids.
Right.
And, you have to help kids realize that they really did something. And when you were telling me about your son who is a broadcaster, and I'm thinking, wow, I was a journalism major. I don't think I could have done that. And I was a little bit older than him, and I think, well, maybe the same age at the time. I was a great writer, but I wasn't necessarily, and I love sports, but I don't think I could have ever been a sports commentator. And I think it's so fast and so furious, and you got to know all this history, and you got to know the players, and you got to have it all in your head. And I just admire that a young person is so focused on doing something like that. So that is just interesting to me, and I'd love to meet him and just kind of ask him a few questions because I want to know what makes that brain.
I feel the same way.
I want to know, and I think that's the kind of curiosity that people. How you get to know people you get to know them, and then they're your neighbor. They're not a stranger. You know 2 things about them, and now you can feel a connection to them. And when people come into Delmar Divine and come to meet me or come to see the building, and when they leave, I say, "Can I give you a hug?" And they always say yes. And that is something for me that is just important, that people realize that I mean this. This isn't a hobby.
No.
This is who my parents raised me to be.
Right.
And my grandparents hoped I would be. They didn't know me, but that's what the American dream is. And I live that American dream. But I'm also contributing to other people's dream.
You absolutely are.
But I have to find out what it is. I have to dig in a little bit.
But I think that that's one of the things that's so beautiful and unique about you and your light is that you really do want to get to know every person that you come into contact with, and you want to help bring forth their light. And how can you help them contribute to their own community, and what can you do to help them?
Yes. And I walk away with so much more than I gave, truly.
I understand that.
Yeah, it is so joyful to be able to know new people, meet new people that you never knew before, and still keep up with the people you've grown up with. And also to help them have, because when you ask them what, about their life, they don't necessarily think they have a bad life, and they don't. But how do you make it better?
Right.
How do you enhance it? And how do you use your gifts for, children have so much to contribute. And I have my most fun with young people when they come to the building. I always measure myself against them. Mm-hmm. All right, next year when you come back, we'll have to measure again, because mostly I see eye to eye with these kids, and I love that. And I'll sit down and be at their level, because people did that for me,
right.
And allowed me to be. I never thought of myself as small. My favorite animal is a giraffe, and I have giraffes, little
mm-hmm.
ceramic giraffes and stuff. And I just think that there's another kid out there that has the same. Wants to be a giraffe too, or wants to be something else, a broadcaster or mm-hmm. a ballerina. And how do we help them be all those things that they wish for themselves, and they just don't know how to go about it? And we have every one of those resources right here in St. Louis. Every single thing that a child could want to be, we could take them to see how to get there.
It has been such a delight to sit and have this conversation with you. You are truly an inspiration. Is there anything I didn't ask you about that you want to share as we're closing out today?
No, I just would say that, I'm pretty accessible on LinkedIn, and, everything about even my email addresses and my LinkedIn contacts. Because, again, most what people want, they don't want 100% of your time. They just want to know where to go for this or how to do that. And having been an entrepreneur, I've learned a lot, and I like to help as many people be successful in St. Louis. My goal is, live to 100 and have, make as long a contribution here and see the fruits of our labors that we all are giving into the city to make it all that it can be. And so I'm there if people want to contact me. A LinkedIn message is easy, and if I can help, I will. If not, I'll find somebody that can.
You are extraordinary. Thank you.
You're welcome.
For taking time with me and for sharing your wisdom and your heart and your hope and your light. I am incredibly grateful.
It's wonderful to see you again. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Likewise. Friends, thank you so much for spending time with Maxine and I hope you are as inspired as I am by our conversation. Please take the time to share this podcast with your friends and spread this light around. Between now and the time we spend time together again, please take good care of you. Thank you for being here. Naturally, it's important to thank the people who support and sponsor the podcast. This episode is supported by Chris Dully, a trusted criminal defense attorney and friend of mine here in St. Louis, who believes in second chances and solid representation. Whether you're facing a DWI, felony, or traffic issue, Chris handles your case personally, with clarity, compassion, and over 15 years of experience. When things feel uncertain, it helps to have someone steady in your corner. Call 314-384-4000 or 314-DUI-HELP, or you can visit dullylawfirm.com to schedule your free consultation.